let's get into it. Now, we all know Bill Gates. You know, sometimes he's a doctor. Sometimes he's just a guy that likes to give to charity. Sometimes he's a public health official, like above a doctor. You know what I mean? Sometimes he's a farmer. It's like he's just always switching personalities. You know, so he takes a little mustache and he's like, "Hello, I'm Farmer Bill," and then he puts on a little stethoscope and then he's like, "Hello, I'm Dr. Bill." In this episode, he is Rupert Murdoch. You know, the owner of Fox. Gentleman recently stepped down because he's getting a little older. I'm sure he's doing just fine. But in this episode, he is the head of a media organization. Okay, or at least that's what it seems like he wants to be. We are talking about how much Bill Gates gives to the media. Not just how much, where it goes. This guy's not selfish. This guy, you know, somebody walks up to you and says, "Don't spend it all in one place." Someone said that to Bill Gates when he was a kid, and he was like, I won't. And he gives it to everybody. You know what I mean? He's giving money to media outlets like Oprah gives cars to single housewives who attend her show. He just hands it out. We're going to get into that. I'm going to show you some research that I did. I'm going to show you a clip of Joe Rogan talking about these exact same things, but I find more than what Joe Rogan brings up. I'm going to let you know about that right now. We're going to get into that. It's wild. Before I bring you all that, I got to bring you to the store. This is IamCoachColin.com, and this is the Public Enemy #1 shirt. And I don't even, is he #1? You know, as you keep going down the rabbit hole, you know, I still think he was #1 over Gates. I gotta say, I do, just because of what he has planned, and it seems like almost like Gates is following what this gentleman wants. And if you look into this gentleman, you'll understand why he is public enemy #1 very quickly. We also have the certified Pure Blood shirt for those of you that stayed strong during the pandemic, did not waver in your beliefs. Good job. It was tough, I know, because I did it as well. That is your certificate of achievement. Get yours now. And we have the bold statement of soul not for sale. Make that bold statement. It's a spiritual war. It's a war of good and evil. And your soul is the prize. Do not sell it for money and fortune. Believe me, it is not worth it. And we also have this shirt, We the People. We got middle fingers. We got that gentleman. You will own nothing and be happy. Get yours now. It's all at IamCoachColin.com. And if you want 10% off of anything you just saw, all you got to do is put in the discount code IamCoachColin, all capital letters, all one word. 1 L in the name Colin gets you 10% off. And if you've done that with us already, I got to thank you. Thank you so much. Now let's get into this first clip. Joe Rogan talking about Bill Gates and his media empire.
That they'll bend to anybody, basically.
Did you see that? I mean, I know Jimmy Dore covered it, but quite a few other people have realized it now. The amount of money that Bill Gates has spent on influencing media.
No, I didn't.
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million.
Jeez.
He's donated to these various media organizations, which for sure has some sort of an impact on how they cover him.
Right. Well, of course, yeah. And look, once upon a time, we were, I've said it many times, we were trained to know that, for instance, think tanks, right, like who was funding them, because think tanks are who get quoted in the New York Times and the Washington Post, right? So they're generating research that goes to journalists, and like sort of surreptitiously that ends up becoming what's covered. And so that's how, like, the Gates Foundation, for instance, will work its way into coverage. It'll sponsor research in an area like education. That's one of the things I'm covering now. And its research becomes, it gets into the news that way. But we were supposed to once have, our ears up and be conscious of who was paying for all this research. Where was that information coming from? And people don't really even think about it now.
See if you can find that story, Jamie.
I'm looking right now. I'm reading an article about someone last year actually was looking into it. Here, I'll show you. Journalism's Gatekeepers is what it's called.
Columbia Journalism
CJR.
Review. Mm-hmm. Is that a respected publication?
No, I mean, look, they've had their issues, but that's the top media criticism
Right here.
outlet, right?
Okay, so this is last year. It says, I recently examined nearly 20,000 charitable grants the Gates Foundation made through the end of June and found that more than $250 million going towards journalism. Receipts included news operations like the BBC, NBC, Al Jazeera, ProPublica, National Journal, The Guardian, Univision, Medium, The Financial Times, The Atlantic, The Texas Tribune, Gannett, Washington Monthly, Le Monde, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Le Monde.
And the Center for Investigative Reporting, charitable organizations affiliated with news outlets like BBC Media Action, the New York Times, Neediest Cases Fund, media companies such as The Participant, whose documentary Waiting for Superman supports Gates' agenda on charter schools, journalistic organizations such as the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, the National Press Foundation, and the International Center for Journalists, and a variety of other groups creating news content or working on journalism, such as the Leo Burnett Company, an ad agency that Gates commissioned to create a news site to promote the success of aid groups. In some cases, recipients say they distributed part of the funding as sub-grants to other journalistic organizations, which makes it difficult to see the full picture of Gates' funding into the Fourth Estate.
Yeah, and as a reporter, you may or may not be aware of all the different ways that money will get in, work its way into the business. But unconsciously, it just sort of seeps in, like
Right.
and that's how it works. Like nobody comes and tells you, well, don't cover this. Well, maybe they do now, actually, or take this approach to covering education. What ends up happening is that you just kind of get a feel based on the reaction of your editor to whatever pitch you're giving at the moment. Hey, would you be interested in this story about whether or not this approach to standardized testing worked, right? And if the editor says, yeah, that's interesting, maybe, right? Then just never to broach that again, right? But if it's with, in the right ideological slant, they're going to be hot for it, right?
Interesting.
And that's how it works. That's how it works with everything. It works, with foreign policy. When I worked in Russia, if you pitched a story to an American editor about how the U.S. funded reform effort was working and there was a growing middle class in provincial Russia that was prospering and people were now taking vacations to Ibiza and stuff like that, you could get anybody to buy that story. But if you came to them with a story about how actually the transformation of capitalism has been really slow. People have lost their health care. There's an explosion of violent crime and addiction, and people are more and more gravitating towards right-wing politics, in large part because of the rapid changes that they weren't ready for. You could not get that story sold, right? So what ended up happening?
Selling stories. That's very interesting. I didn't realize. I let that clip run very long, but I didn't realize how much control the editors had. You would think in a art form such as journalism, if I even dare call it an art form, you would think that the people just need information that's going to help them. They don't need certain slants. They don't need it tilted this way or bent that way. And whether or not we get the information all depends on some editor, which as I get older is very worrisome because it's for sure in a lot of places, in a lot of outlets, it's for sure some young person, very young. They're out of university. We all know how indoctrinated universities are with certain ideologies. What information are you going to get? They're literally gatekeeping. More so than Gates himself. Now, when it comes to what Joe was talking about, that's exactly actually what I found. I found the article that he was reading. It's very, very wild. Now, you already heard Joe say all that. Now, I'm going to pull up. So we have here again. I just want to one more time for everybody, just so you understand exactly what's going on here. At the very end here. Let me pull this up. Where is it? There it is. Let me make me real small. at the very end here, when they're saying, in some cases, recipients say they distributed part of the funding to sub-grants to other journalistic organizations, which makes it hard to see the full picture of Gates' funding into the fourth state. That means he gives so much money and then they start giving money to people. So his influence it's not just him. Let me grab where's my screen? It's not just him getting the money and it's like, here you go. It goes bang and then 10 other hands and then 10 other hands and then 10 other hands. Like, how much control does he have at that point? Again, Joe was just going through it really quickly because I don't think even Jamie was like, oh, I'm kind of looking into it. This person looked into 20,000 grants, nearly 20,000 grants. Let me just, again, what companies are receiving these grants from Bill Gates? We got BBC, NBC, Al Jazeera, ProPublica, National Journal, The Guardian, Univision, Medium. Isn't Medium an online thing? Isn't Medium supposed to be like Substack? Even outlets that seem like they are really pushing independent journalism could be financed by Bill Gates, which is very interesting. The Financial Times. Oh, God. The Atlantic. The Texas Tribune. That blew me off my feet. Are you kidding me? Almost everything that you would sit down and read, whether on paper or in front of a screen, has had money from this gentleman and his organization come into their hands. Washington Monthly. Now, here's the big thing that kind of Joe didn't really give it any, like, this is the Center for Investigative Reporting. Do you know how crazy that is? The Center for Investigative Reporting? It's at the point now, as I'm reading this, you can really only depend on James O'Keefe and people that you're finding via like YouTube and Rumble and all these other places. If this center is receiving money, I don't know. I don't get it, man. I don't get it. And you know why the Washington Post isn't here? Don't be fooled. That's because Jeff Bezos already owns it. I'm sure they have little meetings. It's like, hey, take your story take my story off of your thing. I'll take a story off of mine. Okay. I got a whole bunch. But you know what? And then BBC Action, New York Times, that makes so much sense because Bill Gates hasn't been doing this a long time. And if you really look at the New York Times, they used to be something worth reading. They really did. Like, no matter what anybody wants to say about it, a decade or two ago, they used to be a great outlet for news. You really got information. Man, wild. I got another thing here that I'm going to read, but just think about that. How much that actually spans, But I got to give it to these guys, If I had a bunch of money, I'd spend it in media too. I would. If I had hundreds of billions of dollars, I'd spend it in media too. I would be like, hey, James O'Keefe, can you train 50,000 citizen journalists for me? I just need you to train them all. Please and thank you. That's it. Tucker Carlson, hey, I need you to train a bunch of people how you write scripts. How do you write scripts? How do you read a teleprompter? Yeah, I'm going to pay you $70 million to train all of these people. A year. I don't care. Train them all. I'd be sending all sorts of people into the fray, into the fire. Go. Tell truth. Russell Brand, show these guys how to do it funny. Show these guys how to make it funny every now and then. I would spend all sorts of money. Which really makes me wonder, as I'm saying that, I wonder if there's any good guys, that are doing this same type of thing. Yeah? If there's any good guys who are like, I'm putting 50,000 kids through school. You see, the problem is that they'd have to do it so quietly. The reason that none of us know any guys like that, they would have to be so quiet about it because the second any of these guys got wind of it, they'd be like, you're doing what? You're doing what? How much are you're putting how many kids through school? They're going to be in debt after, right? No, I'm going to pay it all. They'd blow up your plane. You kidding me? They'd blow you up. You'd mysteriously, just pass in your sleep. Be over. Pay your wife to smother you with a pillow. It's true. It's crazy. Man, really makes you think. And, and again, these guys are doing that. There's so many of them. Rockefeller. Rockefeller was from the past. They were doing that from the early 1900s. They were doing that. So now we just have our version of that. This gentleman, Mr. Gates, Jeff Bezos. It's wild that they're allowed to do it even. You would think there'd be something to stand in their way, but you can't really be mad, because if there was something to stand in their way of doing this, there would have been something to stand in Elon Musk's way of buying Twitter, and it seems like he's done a really good job with that, and there's a lot of freedom on there, supposedly. I mean, I'm not big into Twitter, but I'm starting to see that there is a lot of people there who are speaking truth, and they're allowed to, and they're not getting pushed down or pushed out. So I guess they have to be able to do it. Imagine when Jeff Bezos, when he learned that he was allowed to buy the Washington Post. Imagine he bought it and he was just like, so you guys are going to write a story about me? Yeah, sorry. We're about to publish it. Can I have it not be published? They're like, I guess you own it. Okay. And could you just not write any stories about any of my companies ever? Can you just never bring them up? Yeah, you own it, I guess. Oh, he's probably like, yes. And hey, anytime you do write about me, can you always make sure I'm pictured with a really hot chick? They're like, yeah, I guess. He's like, yes. That's why they do this type of thing, man. Let's get into this next thing. This is very interesting, to me at least. We'll see how you feel about it. But this is about Gates. We go up here. This person actually says, does Gates' funding of the media taint objectivity? I think it does. I think it does, at least towards him and what his endeavors are, for sure. So the foundation grants to media organizations such as ABC, The Guardian, all those ones that we already read, raises obvious conflict of interest questions. How can reporting be unbiased when a major player is holding the purse strings? But direct funding of the media organizations is only one way the world's powerful foundation, the most powerful foundation, influences what the public reads, hears, and watches. Now, he's talking about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation when he says that. To garner attention for issues it cares about, the foundation has invested millions in training journalists. That's the wild thing, in training journalists. It's not just funding and they're just walking around like, oh, we got a little bag of money from these people. They're training the next generation of journalists. Again, I've brought up Rockefeller because they trained the school system. They molded the school system. This is like that, but kind of worse, because it's doing it to the people who are supposed to be telling us the truth, who are supposed to be bringing us information. The people who hold the keys to us being informed citizens, properly informed citizens, are being trained by one person who has a certain agenda, possibly. I don't know. I'm not in the guy's head. I can't say for sure. It funds research on the most effective ways to craft media messages. Gates-backed think tanks, that's exactly what Matt Taibbi brought up, turn out media fact sheets and newspaper opinion pieces. Magazine and scientific journals get Gates money to publish research and articles. Experts coached in Gates-funded programs write columns that appear in media outlets from the New York Times to the Huffington Post, while digital portals blur the lines between journalism and spin. That's crazy. And then this last part actually tripped me out, because I was thinking Rockefeller the whole time I was talking about this. The efforts are part of the foundation, what the foundation calls advocacy and policy. Over the past decade, Gates has devoted $1 billion to these programs, which now account for 1/10 of the giant's philanthropic $3 billion a year spending. So they spend $3 billion a year. $1 billion goes into media. How crazy is that? The Gates Foundation spends more on policy and advocacy. Again, I shouldn't say just on media. It's into what they deem policy and advocacy. Then more They spend more on that than the most big foundations, including Rockefeller and MacArthur, in total spending. So they spend more than Rockefeller. That's chilling. That's chilling. If you were ever wondering to yourself, what were all these people doing while Rockefeller was doing that and this family was doing that? What were you doing while Gates was doing what he was doing? You know, you were just living your life. That's what people were doing. You didn't know about all that stuff back then. You didn't know the school system was being molded by one person and churning out workers because this gentleman had all of these factories and he just wanted the next generation to be used to working in factories. Didn't know that. And now we didn't know that there is a whole school of journalists who are being trained to only speak about certain things and stay to a certain agenda. You kind of knew, but now you know for sure. But what are we going to do about it? I have no idea. What do you think? Let me know what you think in the comment section. I mean, again, I said at the beginning of this, you know, very commendable man. You know, for you to be a doctor for a couple years, a research specialist for a couple years, you're a climate change specialist. These are a lot of hats this gentleman has on. You got to commend him. And now on top of that, he's teaching journalists. Obviously not directly. We can't put that on him. But it is wild when you see one person inserting themselves in so many different places, and it makes you wonder why. But again, you know, the past always reveals what the future is, you know, going towards. You see what Rockefeller did. You see why he was doing it with the whole, well, I shouldn't say what Rockefeller did, what his people and him, what they thought was best for their interests when it comes to the school system. They needed workers. So they made the classroom and the schools similar to the factories and the break rooms. The bell goes off for recess. The bell goes off for lunch. They're getting people accustomed to this way of life, getting them used to it. Maybe that's the same thing that's happening now. I don't know. Again, I'm not in the guy's head. I don't know the guy. The guy could be the nicest person in the world. You have no idea. I'm just showing things. That's all. Anyways, guys, if you haven't liked the video already, like the video. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe. We're making 1 to 3 videos a day. It gets hard to keep up, so hit that notification bell. And other than that, I am out.